I'm David from Levika Photography, and today we are checking out FE lenses, 35mm primes for Sony FE mount. And basically I'm going to test these on the A7R III. We've got at the mid-range the Sigma art lens, 35mm 1.4. This usually retails for somewhere around $900. I've seen this as low as like $820. Then we've got the Sony Zeiss Distagon T ZA 35mm 1.4. This one usually retails for $1,600, but I see it on sale, or usually sold around $1,400. And then the Rokinon 35mm 1.4, which retails for $800, but right now I think it's $550, and I paid $520 for this when from Prime Day. So this one I actually own. These two buggers I had to rent, and I rented these from Tempe Camera here in Phoenix. Actually got a pretty good deal. I think they're like $40 a day or something like that, which isn't too bad. So I've only got these over the weekend. So let's go over the specs really quick so you guys can see what these things are all about. So first off, we have the Rokinon, and this thing fits this camera really nicely. These lenses are actually all about the same size. And they have a lot more in common than they do differences. The main thing about this lens is it has 11 elements in 9 groups, and it has 2 spherical elements and 2 HR elements. There is no manual control on the outside of this. Everything is fly-by-wire. Focus is fly-by-wire. No manual aperture, just a very clean looking lens. Nothing too exciting about it. This is the Sony Zeiss Distagon T, and this is the 35mm 1.4 ZA. And like the other lenses, it doesn't really offer much on the outside. It's a fly-by-wire autofocus ring. It does have aperture control, and one thing that I thought that was interesting about this aperture control is it is not a true manual aperture. This, again, is fly-by-wire. 12 elements in 8 groups. And this thing has 3 spherical elements and then 1 advanced AA element, which controls chromatic aberrations. And then it also has a ton of coating to eliminate ghosting, flare, and blah blah blah. They all have a shit ton of lens coating in them. Now the other thing that all of these lenses have in common, which is actually kind of surprising, is that they all have 9 bladed rounded apertures. And you're going to see that the bokeh from all of them almost matches when you're looking at the actual bokeh balls. They're all about the same shape. The Sigma art lens, it does have a manual focus, autofocus switch that you can switch over on here. The aperture is electronically controlled. You do get a manual focus meter at the top, which I do like. I did find this to actually be very accurate. This one has 13 elements in 11 groups, and it has 1 FLD element and 4 SLD elements, 2 spherical elements, and of course what they call super layer multi-coating, and yeah. So using the A7R III, I'm going to do a quick phase detection autofocus test in video. So all these are going to be shot wide open at f1.4. They're all going to be shot at the exact same settings. It's set up on manual video right now, so we'll just see what that looks like. So how well do these lenses track? Autofocus tracking in video. So for this, I am just putting these all at f1.4 all the way open and just seeing how well they track. And they all seem to have the same focus distance. This is 11.6 or 11.8 inches. They're all the same. But anyway, this is how close you can actually get. So let me go ahead and do the walk. So that's the Rokinon. Alright, this is the Sigma, and this again is about 11.6 inches, is about as close as you can get to it. So I'm going to go ahead and do the walk. Same. All right, so this is the Zeiss and the Distagon FE 1.4 35mm ZA. And again, this is about 11.6 inches, is about as close as you can get it to autofocus. But I'm going to do the walk. You would think that this would be better, but to me they all feel pretty much the same. I don't see a difference between them at all. Now let's see how good the optics really are. So we're going to go ahead and turn all of the distortion settings off. All right, let's look at the vignetting from each of these lenses. So just so you know, this is what each section is. Yeah, really pretty bad on all of them wide open. The Sigma seems to be about a stop less than the Sony, and the Sony seems to be about a stop less than the Rokinon. At f2, the Sigma is starting to lighten up a little bit. The Sony and the Rokinon pretty much look the same. Maybe the Rokinon looks a hair better than the Sony as far as just the difference in contrast from the extreme corner to the center. At f2.8, this is where things get interesting. The Sigma is completely clean, and the Sony now actually looks noticeably worse than the Rokinon. Alright, what you're looking at here is what the lens looks like with no distortion corrections applied. So you can see the Sigma has just a little bit of barrel distortion, but hardly any. Really, it's just the vignetting on here. Now, with the Sony, you have a little bit of a pincushion effect, and then of course a lot of vignetting. And then with the Rokinon, you can see it actually has a little bit of barrel distortion. Alright, so this is the Sigma with distortion correction off, and this is with it turned on. This is with the Sony off, this is with it turned on. And this is with the Rokinon off, and this is with it turned on. Alright, I'm not going to bore you guys to death with this, but this is just like a muddled resolution chart that I made up a long time ago to help me test lenses when I first get them, just to see where they're at. This is more interesting than the Nyquist chart that I use to actually measure resolution. So at least with this one, it's more of a visual aid than anything else. But anyway, just to give you guys an idea of where this is at, and in order, the Zeiss, Sigma, and Rokinon, 4100, 4250, and 4000 is where these are at in the center. So all the way open at f1.4, they're very sharp in the center. I mean, really good. But by the time you get to the extreme corners at f1.4, if you're looking at this, then we've got the Zeiss coming in at 1750 and the Sigma coming in at 2750, and then the Rokinon coming in at 1850. Now at f2.8, the resolution in the center actually only gets better. Starting again with the Zeiss 4550, the Sigma's 4700, and the Rokinon's 4600. Those are just amazing numbers. And basically when you go over to the corners, the Zeiss still sucks at 2750, and the Sigma's at 3500, and the Rokinon's at 3150. f5.6 is the sweet spot of all these lenses. 4650 for the Zeiss is its top resolution. 4800 for the Sigma is its top resolution, and 4700 for the Rokinon is its top resolution. Now when we go over to the corners, you're going to see a massive improvement on all of them. 3050 for the Zeiss, and then the Rokinon, or the Sigma, is 4100, and then the Rokinon is 4000. So that is really amazing. This is at f16, and what's really amazing is at f16 we've got 3700 for the Zeiss, 3950 for the Sigma, and 3800 for the Rokinon. And then the corners are again really close all the way at f16. So the Zeiss is 3100, the Sigma is 3250, and the Rokinon is 3200. These lenses you can shoot at every f-stop and get a good sharp image. That's the thing that's really nice about it. And don't worry about the corners at f1.4, because most of the time if you're shooting at f1.4, you're shooting people, and you're not going to be concerned about the corners with people. It just doesn't show up in your shots. Just pay attention to the center, because that is what is important. Alright, here's the Rokinon at f1.4, and there's the sun, and I'm just going to keep it on that ridge. You can see what the cross glare is like. A little bit of a rainbow effect, not too bad. Let's stop it down to f4 and do the same motion again. So you can see really dimensional kind of, but cross light, there's a little bit of cross light glare, it's not too bad. Alright, here's the Zeiss, same thing, f1.4, checking the cross glare, and these are with the hoods on, by the way. So just so you know, that's what that looks like. So f4. Alright, this is at f4 now. And that's what the cross glare looks like. So it has some, especially right around there. That's kind of harsh. Alright, here's the Sigma at f1.4, and that is with direct light. This is with cross glare. Let's go back to right there. Alright, let me stop this down to f4, and then we'll go back and do the same thing again. Lens flare quality is about the same. So this is Mariah. So Mariah, do I have your permission to use these photos for a YouTube video?
You do.
Alright, so for this first little thing, we're going to shoot at f2. So I've got her set up right there. That is what the background looks like. We're using the Godox 8200, and I am just going to go ahead and shoot her. So I'm going to park you guys right here.
No, not today. Lunch. After the other.
I can't get no love. I can't get no luck. Yeah. 'Cause with you it's trouble. Trouble, trouble, trouble. Try to set you free. Yeah. Try to let it be. But with you it's trouble. Trouble, trouble, trouble. Some say love is like sparks and dynamite. I just wanna lay low. What if we could try tone it down a while? Keep us steady afloat. But you got that trouble running through your veins. When I ask for no more, you go all insane. Tried everything, but you just make the same. Trouble, 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 yeah.
This is shot at f2, ISO 100 and 1/80th of a second. Now the sun is starting to go down, so you can see the progression of where the sun's at. Basically, it's hard to tell these apart. So right now, I'm going to let you guess which one is which. And while we do that, let's go ahead and zoom into the details here and see, and look at the sharpness, look at the color, look at her face, her eyes. And by the way, I was using iFocus on the A7r III pretty much the entire time for all these photos. So now that you see these, which lens do you think is which? Here's the answer. Alright, next set. Now these again were done in the exact same settings. f1.4 ISO 400 at 250th of a second. And I tried to switch lenses as fast as I could to keep the same light, but look at what's going on here. And again, I used iFocus only, so that was the goal. So if we go in and look at her dress, the color, the ground, her toes, which match her dress perfectly. And then if we look at her, Which one do you think is which? So go ahead, take it all in. For this next set of images, I only used natural light of this tunnel. That was it. These are shot at ISO 400, f1.4, and 250th of a second again. And again, I'm not editing the background at all. I did just some minor pimple cleanup on her, but that was it. Take a look at the lights in the background, and you can see the kind of greenish halo chromatic aberrations that are coming off of them. All three lenses exhibit that. But then you look at her hands, the belt, everything. So which one do you think is which? Here's your answer. Alright, same thing again. This time I used a strobe again, and I'm shooting at 200th of a second at ISO 400 with a Godox AD200 and the S7 softbox. So go ahead and take a look at this and tell me which one do you think is which. And let me zoom in here so you can see her face, and then look at the bokeh balls behind her. And here's your answer. Now that you've seen this, the onioning effect in the bokeh balls of the Zeiss lens is actually really, really bad. It just looks like a bunch of eyeballs staring back at you. It's really kind of weird. The Rokinon doesn't nearly exhibit that as much, and either does the Sigma. The Sigma is actually the cleanest out of all of them. Same scenario. And again, which one do you think is which? And these are shot at the exact same settings. So let's go ahead and zoom in, and you can see just by her lips that we've got these really sharp, and her eyes. And these are all completely just hitting the spot dead on. But the second we go to the bokeh balls, you guessed it, here is your answer. You know, it's kind of weird because the smoothness, the roundness, I think the Rokinon's got the shape right. And then the Zeiss has this weird eyeball effect over here. And the Sigma's perfectly smooth within that. So I have to give the bokeh to Sigma on this. I mean, it's just so good. The Rokinon, though, is keeping up with it. The Zeiss, though, not so much. Alright, so here she is in the studio. And now you can look at these under controlled lighting. It's all the same lighting, and again, nothing has been done except for just minor touch-ups with pimples on her face. But outside of that, this is how the picture actually looks directly off the camera. Nothing crazy about it. So let me go ahead and zoom in and look at the face and look at the eyes. Now I'm using eye focus again, and you can tell this is at f2 at ISO 100 at 200th of a second. So there's no noise, there's nothing here that we have to worry about. The lighting's all the same angle, and you know, just looking at this, can you tell which one is which? Alright, now for some landscape. Now I only took this one image because I literally ran out of time renting these lenses. So I just wanted to show you this is what it looks like if you're shooting at f1.4. Now, if you look up into the palm trees, this is kind of a dead giveaway as to which one's which. And these are all the way open at f1.4. Now a lot of you may be thinking, oh well, the Zeiss, there's some wind going up and that could have made that kind of blurry effect on the palm tree. This was shot at 4,000th of a second, so I don't think that was actually an issue. If we scroll down, you'll see it's just softer over here. The stock here is much stronger in these two images. The chromatic aberrations are a little bit heavier on the Rokinon, but again, this is at 1.4 trying to shoot a landscape. It's just kind of ridiculous, but I just wanted to show you guys what this looked like. So you have a nice shallow depth field. It actually works. Now I know one of the questions that you guys are going to have is, does this work for astrophotography? And that's actually why I'm showing you this, because even though I live in the city and it's really hard for me to get out to someplace to where you can shoot astrophotography, But like, let's say if this landscape was at night somewhere where you could actually shoot the Milky Way in the background, the Rokinon, its chroma is actually acceptable at f2. The Sigma, its chroma is acceptable and almost excellent at f2 and really excellent at f2.8. In the extreme corners, the Rokinon's really acceptable at f2.8, but excellent at f4. Now, unfortunately, the Zeiss is just not acceptable for chroma at all, so it really won't work for stars. But the Sigma and the Rokinon totally do. So this shot was done at f11, and these are pretty much the same order. So what I'm seeing here is, if we zoom in, again, this is where I was hitting, was just dead center middle of the bridge, and you'll see that on all of them everything is pretty much in focus. But what I am having an issue with on the Zeiss lens is that up in the clouds, like right through here, it's actually starting to lose definition, like the contrast is just a hair too high on it. Whereas the Sigma and the Rokinon are doing really, really well. And again, the Rokinon is just slightly warmer. And if we go to the palm tree stock, you'll see it again that, you know, the Sigmas, or the Zeiss, is just not quite as sharp as the Sigma or the Rokinon. And chromatic aberration wise, I really think that Sigma's just killing it here, and the Rokinon is really doing a very good job. Well, that was a nightmare. I'm going to let you guys know right now, I am not going to do a triple lens review again. This was not easy to do. You know, just reviewing the lenses is not that big of a deal, but when you're trying to shoot a model and recreate basically the same shot with each lens just to get a point across is very difficult to do, especially when you only have like roughly an hour and a half shooting time. That was tricky. I have to thank Mariah for coming all the way over just to be my model for the evening. I thought that was great. She was a wonderful person to work with. Juggling these, though, just in between each shooting scenario was extremely difficult. 2 lenses, not a big deal, but 3, that slows things down. And then she has to try to remember like which pose she just did so we could kind of make them feel the same when we're doing comparison images, and it was tricky. Now, on her shots, I didn't really hardly edit anything at all. You know, I went in, what you're seeing is the actual color, the actual exposure. All I did was, you know, clean up a couple of her pimples that she asked me to clean up. So that was it. That was just basically as these are. My final conclusion about this would have to be that if you are looking for the best 35mm 1.4, the Sigma Art, hands down. This thing is just technically perfect. The only thing that it has, maybe a slight flaw in it, in my opinion, is a very slight pincushion distortion. But that can easily be fixed when you're bringing your raw files in, just using a slight bit of distortion correction. But outside of that, this thing has excellent vignette control. And as far as technical sharpest, this is the sharpest out of all of these in the center and on the extreme corners. And this is also the sharpest wide open, and this gives you the cleanest image wide open, hands down. So the Sigma Art is absolutely sick. The Zeiss. This was the biggest disappointment in my book. The fact that this has a cheesy electronic aperture is really just kind of a downside. It also has a click switch, so you can make it click while it's going, but it's still an electronic aperture. That was kind of surprising. I guess it's not like a deal killer, but it's just kind of like, it's a little cheesy. It just didn't have very good corners at all. Like, I thought the corners would be way better, but they just kind of, they were always kind of soft, and then it had its vignetting issue stayed all the way through all of the different apertures, but at f5.6 it was still a stop darker than the Rokinon. Now let's talk about the Rokinon for a second. So the Rokinon actually performed very well. It was right in between these two. Corner sharpness, it surpasses the Zeiss as well, pretty much all the way through the range, but it doesn't compare with the Sigma. And vignetting wise, this had the worst vignetting wide open. It was a stop darker than the Zeiss and the corners wide open, but at f5.6, or actually anywhere above f2, it was better than the Zeiss. The other surprising thing about the Rokinon that I noticed was that it was just slightly, and I mean we're talking slightly, warmer than these other two lenses. It just had just this little slight warm tint to it, but still not a big deal. The Rokinon, I think, is actually a stellar deal if you get it on sale at $550. I mean, yeah, you just, if you're on a budget, this is definitely the lens to get. If you have a little bit more spending room, the Sigma Art is definitely the one to get. If you want to buy the best lens you can, it's still the Sigma Art. If you want to waste a lot of money but you love the Zeiss name and like the resale value of the Zeiss, then the Sony is probably for you. But anyway, that's the conclusion of this review. So I hope you guys liked this video. Give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and we'll talk to you guys later. See ya.